everyone, and welcome back to Keeping Up with Contenders China for Week 4. With just 1 week left to go in the competition, this was the week of fighting for top seeds, locking into playoffs, and asserting dominance. So let's have a look at how the games panned out and what we should be expecting going into the final week. Restart versus Alter Ego. Facing each other in this series were the bottom 2 teams. It was virtually guaranteed that neither were going to be making it into playoffs, but whoever lost this series would have it mathematically ruled out. The winner had another week to try. Even then, the players on these teams still had their chance to prove themselves to other teams if nothing else. The name of the game was going to be Synergy. Who had synergized with their new team more? Restart's new Zarya Raphael, previously Delete Brig, or Alter Ego's new flex support Aztec? Alter Ego looked like they were a bit slow at implementing their ideas. Playing Winston against Restart's Reinhardt on Busan Downtown allowed Restart to take the point, and when both teams ran the same Mercy Ana support line on their Numbani dives, it was clear that Restart could just handle it better. Alter Ego ended up bringing in another new player, Jiazi, the ultimate Mei one-trick. At times he looked good, but with fatal mistakes like cutting off his supports with his walls, combined with how well Raphael used his bubbles to protect his own team from being frozen, it just wasn't enough. Team CC versus Lingan eSports. There was a massive pressure on both teams coming into this game, as LGE got stomped by T1W last week, and so Team CC had to prove that they could do the same before going forward to face T1W themselves in Week 5. There was the risk that Team CC could be too predictable in their playstyle, but then, if they're simply better, does it really matter? After LGE's experience against T1W, they could come into this game way more prepared, but they could also just be worse. It became quickly obvious that this series would be closer than anticipated, as LGE took Ilios. Their new off-tank Tian was great, a massive upgrade on Duck, and supported their main tank iDodo well. Team CC's exalted main tank Jachiran, however, was finally being called out for mistakes he was making, namely over-aggression. The game went to map 5, which is not what Team CC were hoping for. Even the last game hung on the 3rd point of Nepal. Ajian on LG was popping off, and their quad DPS defense on Route 66 worked much better than Alter Ego's attempt. Ultimately, it ended up swinging in Team CC's favor, with their switch off of K-Heart and onto Songboo's likely being their saving grace, his Gravitons doing exactly what they had to secure them the game. 666 Legend versus Laboratory. Everyone knew that all eyes were going to be on Seeds. The Wrecking Ball one-trick who never quite manages to mesh with his team, neither setting them up correctly nor being set up correctly himself. It's also known that TSL have 2 main preferred comp styles, Goats and Super McCree. Against other teams, this could maybe be exploited, but it was possible that with Lab's outlandish compositional choices, both could be viable in this series. Laboratory ended up taking Hollywood, their first mat win in the entirety of the season so far. However, it was possible that this was just down to TSL's inconsistency. That said, Sober was impressing, getting a big 3k after receiving a nano boost. In the second half, TSL perked up. They took Horizon Lunar Colony and Route 66 in a lot more of a dominating fashion, after suddenly whipping out comps with Torbjorn and Bastion. We also witnessed a miracle. Seeds switched off of Wrecking Ball. However, it was too little too late, and sadly, it got no value. Flag Gaming versus Big Time Regal Gaming. Both of these teams are already locked in for playoffs, and both sitting at a 3-0 win-loss. So this battle really came down to who was to be the number 1 seed of Group B. The thing is, Flag Gaming have star power that BTRG really lack. Their ironclad tank line in Over and MG, a formidable DPS player in Jason, and arguably the best support line in Chinese contenders, Mika and Coldest. How were BTRG going to prove themselves against that? Flag took the first 2 maps, leaving the formerly great BTRG wanting. Effort, who's been relentlessly praised for his DPS prowess, was really struggling. Their Super McCree composition looked weak, but it was possible that this was down to Reborn being on the main tank role instead of the usual Riven. Mika and Coldest of course showed up again, with Analyst Scribe comparing them to the old school Toby and Rouge Hong days. However, switching out their tanks did cause a dent in their team play and led BTRG to take a map off of them. It just wasn't enough. T1W versus Zenith of Optimism. There was no doubt that this series was going to be a stomp. The bottom team with no map wins was to be facing the very best team with no map losses. This was a chance for T1W to definitively snatch first seed in Group A for themselves. It would be interesting to see who they'd be subbing in, if Assassin would be making an appearance, and how the Zarya play would pan out. After T1W's GOATS victory against LGE, who knew? Zoo were putting up a fight. T1W took Ilios quickly, but Numbani was only 1-3-2. That said, T1W's main tank Silver proved he was one of the best, after climbing up this season with big improvements in his play. 2 full holds later, and T1W had a 4-0 victory in their pockets. It came back down to the tank line that T1W were boasting, Silver behind the shield, and Hy-Vee synergizing with him so well on D.Va. And with China famously lacking in eye-catching off-tanks, it could be that T1W have snaffled themselves one of the best. LGD Gaming versus Lucky Future. Of these two teams, LGD were the only one locked in for playoffs. In order for Lucky Future to secure their spot, they had to win this series, otherwise it would roll on to next week for them to take it. But their main tank Sowat has been a consistent weak spot for them over the weeks, and to achieve their goal, he was going to have to step up. LGD's weak spot was DPS Shocheng, and LF would have to know to pressure him. Straight into Busan, it was obvious that Blackbean was significantly outperforming Shocheng, leading LF to take the map for themselves. Blackbean's use of his shield to work with his team vastly outweighed the damage that Shocheng was blocking with his projected barriers. We finally got to see Eternal out of Brig Jail, spreading his wings into the skies and onto the Rocket Queen. Hanamura lasted a while, eventually ending in a nail-biting draw. LGD's Tonchio was landing great Earth Shatters, but Euterpe wasn't making his life easy, landing some great boops himself. Ultimately though, LF didn't secure their playoff spot and must wait until they face Restart in Week 5 to see if they make it through. So that was Week 4 of Keeping Up with Contenders China. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to tune into the broadcast this coming weekend at twitch.tv/broadcastgg for the final week of the competition. And then next week on this channel to go over it all before we have to wait until playoffs in January.